The unexpected encounter. The rain fell in diagonal sheets, transforming the city streets into a labyrinth of reflective surfaces and blurred edges. Marcus Rodriguez pulled his worn leather jacket tighter, more out of habit than actual protection from the elements. At 35, he developed a perpetual sense of being slightly out of place, not quite belonging to the corporate world he worked in, nor to the artistic circles he secretly admired. The financial district was a ghost town after midnight. Sleek glass towers reflected fragments of streetlights, creating a kaleidoscope of muted colors against the wet pavement. Marcus's footsteps echoed against the empty sidewalk, a rhythmic counterpoint to the distant hum of city infrastructure. He wasn't supposed to be here this late. The forensic accounting report for Quantum Horizon Technologies was due in the morning, and something about the company's financial records had been nagging at him for weeks. Small inconsistencies. Microtransactions that seemed to vanish between digital layers. Patterns that didn't quite make sense. A sudden movement caught his peripheral vision. At first, Marcus thought it was just another trick of the rain-slicked streets, a reflection, a shadow, a momentary illusion. But then he saw her. Standing perfectly still beneath a flickering street lamp, she was dressed in what appeared to be a slate-gray jumpsuit that seemed to shimmer and change texture with each raindrop. She wasn't looking at him. Or was she? Her gaze swept the street with an intensity that felt almost mechanical. No, calculated. Like someone scanning a complex system, searching for a specific variable. Marcus found himself stopping, his breath catching in his throat. Then she turned. Their eyes met. Time seemed to compress and expand simultaneously. Marcus felt a bizarre sensation, as if something was reaching into the deepest recesses of his mind, searching, probing. The woman's eyes were an impossible color, not quite blue, not quite silver, with something that looked like circuitry dancing beneath their surface. Marcus Rodriguez, she said. Not a question. A statement. Her voice was unlike anything he'd ever heard. Smooth, yet with an underlying resonance that seemed to vibrate just beyond the range of normal human hearing. It was as if multiple tones were speaking simultaneously. He should have been terrified. Should have run. Called out. Done something. But Marcus found himself rooted to the spot, his analytical mind desperately trying to process what was happening. Who are you? He managed to whisper. The woman took a step forward. Her movement was fluid, almost too precise, like a projection that had been meticulously programmed rather than a natural human stride. You've been looking, she said. Searching through data most would never notice. The micropatterns. The invisible connections. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. How could she know about his recent investigation? He'd been discreet, careful. The files were encrypted, stored on a private server that wasn't connected to any network. I don't know what you're talking about, he lied, his voice slightly unsteady. A hint of something, was it amusement, flickered across her face. The human capacity for denial is remarkable, she murmured, more to herself than to him. You're close. Closer than anyone has been in decades. Before Marcus could respond, a low humming filled the air. Not a sound, exactly, but a vibration that seemed to pass through him, making every nerve ending suddenly hyper-aware. The street lights flickered. For a microsecond, the rain appeared to suspend in midair. And then everything changed. Shadows moved at the edge of his vision. Not human shadows. Something else. Something that didn't quite conform to the laws of physics Marcus had spent his entire professional life studying and believing in. We need to move, the woman said suddenly, her tone shifting from observational to urgent. Now. Marcus Rodriguez, a man who had built his entire career on logic, rational analysis, and cold, hard data, found himself doing something completely out of character. He believed her. Little did he know, this moment would be the first step into a journey that would challenge everything he thought he understood about reality, technology, and humanity's place in the universe. The rain continued to fall, washing away any evidence of what had just transpired, leaving only questions, and the faintest hint of something extraordinary about to unfold. Fragments of memory. The safe house was anything but safe-looking. Nestled in an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city, it was a warren of concrete and rusted metal, the kind of place most people would go out of their way to avoid. The woman, who had introduced herself as Arya, moved with calculated precision, her fingers dancing across a device that looked more like liquid mercury than any technological instrument Marcus had ever seen. "Sit," she commanded, not looking up. Marcus, who had spent the last hour alternating between shock, confusion, and a growing sense of something extraordinary, complied. His mind was a hurricane of questions, each more pressing than the last. "Start talking," he said, surprised by the firmness in his voice. "Who are you? What was that back there? And how do you know about my investigation?" Arya's fingers continued their intricate dance across the mercurial device. Holographic fragments of data, strings of code, financial records, satellite imagery, flickered and danced around her like digital fireflies. "You've been tracking something," she said. It wasn't a question. Quantum Horizon Technologies. Their financial anomalies. The transactions that don't make sense. Marcus leaned forward. This was familiar ground. Numbers. Patterns. Something he could understand. Their accounting is impossible. Microtransactions that appear and disappear. Financial movements that defy standard economic models. It's like the money is moving through something, Arya finished for him. Not just between accounts. Through something else entirely. A holographic projection erupted from her device. Marcus recognized some of the data, financial records he'd been analyzing. But now they were interconnected differently. Lines of connection he hadn't seen before began to form a complex, almost organic network. "What am I looking at?" he whispered. Arya's expression was unreadable. The truth. Or a fragment of it, at least. The projection showed financial transactions not just moving between bank accounts, but seemingly phasing through multiple dimensional planes. Numbers would vanish from one column, only to reappear in another, following a logic that defied conventional understanding. "This isn't just about money," Arya said. "It's about something much larger. A technology so advanced, it makes what humans currently understand look like stone tools compared to quantum computers." Marcus's professional skepticism warred with the evidence literally floating in front of him. "That's impossible." A soft, almost sad laugh escaped Arya. Impossible is a word used by people who haven't yet understood the limits of their own perception. She touched the projection, and suddenly the financial data dissolved, replaced by something else. Fragmented images. A research facility. Massive energy readings. Strange architectural designs that seemed to bend and twist in ways that challenged fundamental understanding of space. "Who are you?" Marcus asked again, this time with a hint of desperation. Arya turned to him. For the first time, something close to emotion flickered in her eyes. "I'm a guardian. A protector. And you, Marcus Rodriguez, are far more important to what's coming than you realize." Before he could respond, a warning signal erupted from her device. The mercurial surface rippled, transforming into a defensive shield. "They found us," she said simply. The abandoned industrial complex suddenly felt very small. And very vulnerable. Marcus's mind raced. His entire understanding of reality was being systematically dismantled, piece by piece. The financial anomalies he'd been investigating were just the tip of an incomprehensibly large iceberg. "Who's found us?" he asked, even as he knew the answer would only lead to more questions. Arya's hand was already on his arm, her touch both cool and electric. "The ones who want to ensure certain truths remain hidden. The ones who have been manipulating human progress from the shadows." Outside, something moved. Not a human movement. Not an animal. Something else entirely. And Marcus Rodriguez, forensic accountant turned unwilling protagonist in a story larger than he could comprehend, realized his life would never be the same again. The hunt was just beginning. The pursuit begins. The underground research facility was nothing like Marcus had imagined. Carved deep beneath the city's infrastructure, it was a labyrinth of sleek corridors and rooms that seemed to breathe with a technological pulse. Arya moved with purposeful strides, her mercurial device now transformed into what looked like a complex navigation system. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice a controlled whisper. Marcus struggled to keep up, his mind still processing the events of the past few hours. The facility was a stark contrast to the abandoned industrial complex where they'd taken refuge. Here, everything was precision engineered, with surfaces that seemed to shift and adapt as they moved. "Where are we going?" he asked, ducking to avoid a low-hanging network of translucent data conduits. Arya didn't slow down. "To find the first piece of evidence that will help you understand." They passed rooms filled with technology that defied Marcus's understanding. Holographic displays flickered with complex algorithms. Machines that looked more like living organisms than mechanical devices hummed with an almost organic energy. Suddenly, Arya stopped. Her hand shot out, pressing against a seemingly solid wall. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the wall rippled, dissolving like liquid metal to reveal a hidden chamber. "This," she said, "is where it all began." The room was a time capsule of scientific discovery. Massive screens covered the walls, showing fragmented images, satellite views of strange energy signatures, financial transaction maps that looked more like neural networks, and what appeared to be architectural plans for structures that couldn't possibly exist. Marcus approached one of the screens. His fingers, usually more comfortable dancing across spreadsheets and financial reports, traced the intricate lines of a diagram that seemed to represent something between a building and a living organism. "Quantum Horizon Technologies was just a front," Arya explained. "A way to move resources, to hide the real research." A series of images began to play. Research facilities. Massive energy experiments. Strange architectural designs that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality. Marcus watched, transfixed. "What am I looking at?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Arya's expression was grave. The first attempts to understand and manipulate dimensional transfer. Not just of data. Of matter. Of consciousness. Before Marcus could respond, a low-frequency alarm began to pulse. The mercurial device on Arya's arm transformed, becoming a defensive shield that hummed with contained energy. "They're close," she said simply. The pursuit that had begun on rain-slicked city streets was about to escalate. Marcus's analytical mind, which had always found comfort in numbers and predictable patterns, was being stretched beyond its limits. These weren't just financial anomalies anymore. This was something far bigger. "Who are they?" he asked, watching as Arya began to prepare for what was clearly an imminent confrontation. She pulled what looked like a weapon from a hidden compartment in the wall. It wasn't a gun, not in any traditional sense. The device seemed to be made of the same mercurial material as her earlier tools, capable of shifting and adapting. "Guardians," Arya said. "But not the kind that protect. The kind that preserve a specific version of reality. The kind that will do anything to keep certain truths hidden." A sound like distant thunder rolled through the facility. But Marcus knew it wasn't thunder. It was something else. Something coming. The first explosion rocked the facility, sending cascades of technological debris falling around them. Arya's defensive shield expanded, creating a protective bubble around Marcus. "Stay close," she commanded. And then the real hunt began. Shadows moved beyond the protective barrier. Not human shadows. Something else entirely. Shapes that seemed to phase in and out of normal perception, defying the laws of physics Marcus had spent his entire career studying. Marcus Rodriguez, forensic accountant turned unwilling protagonist, realized his life had just become far more complicated than any financial investigation he'd ever undertaken. The truth was coming. And some people would kill to keep it hidden. Uncovering the truth. The safe house was anything but conventional. Nestled within a series of interconnected underground chambers, it pulsed with a low, rhythmic energy that seemed to vibrate just beyond the edge of human perception. Marcus watched as Arya worked, her movements a blur of precision and purpose. "We don't have much time," she said, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface that flickered with complex data streams. Survival had become their new normal. Since escaping the research facility, they'd been moving constantly, staying one step ahead of the mysterious pursuers Arya called the Guardians. Marcus had gone from being a meticulous forensic accountant to something else entirely, a witness to a reality far more complex than he'd ever imagined. A massive display materialized in the center of the room, showing a three-dimensional map that looked like a hybrid between a financial network and a cosmic diagram. Lines of energy pulsed and shifted, connecting points that seemed to exist both within and beyond traditional space. "These aren't just financial transactions," Arya explained, zooming into a particular cluster of data points. "They're dimensional transfers. Resources being moved not just between accounts, but between realities." Marcus leaned closer. His analytical mind, which had once found comfort in spreadsheets and balance sheets, now struggled to comprehend the layers of information before him. "How is this possible?" Arya's expression was a mixture of determination and something else, a deep, almost personal pain. Quantum Horizon Technologies was never just a company. It was a front for something much larger. A project decades in the making. The display shifted, revealing fragmented images. Research facilities. Experimental chambers. Strange architectural designs that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality. Marcus recognized some of the financial anomalies he'd been investigating, now contextualized in a much broader framework. "They've been preparing," Arya continued. "Gathering resources. Building infrastructure across multiple dimensional planes." A sudden alarm erupted from her mercurial device. The holographic display flickered, defensive protocols activating instantaneously. "They're close," she said simply. Marcus had learned enough to know who they were. The Guardians. Mysterious enforcers of a reality he was only beginning to understand. Protectors of secrets that were never meant to be revealed. "We need allies," Marcus said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. The man who had once found comfort in the predictable world of numbers and financial reports was gone. In his place was someone who understood that reality was far more fluid than he'd ever imagined. Arya turned to him, a hint of something, respect. Surprise, flickering in her eyes. "There are others. Researchers. Scientists. People who've caught glimpses of the truth. But reaching them won't be easy." The safe house began to pulse with a different energy. Not a threat. Something else. A preparation. "Tell me everything," Marcus said. "Everything about what's really happening." And so Arya began to unravel a story that would challenge everything Marcus thought he knew about human potential, dimensional travel, and the true nature of reality. The first piece of the puzzle was a project called Nexus, a scientific endeavor so ambitious, so potentially world-changing, that entire governments and corporate entities had conspired to keep it hidden. Marcus Rodriguez, once a forensic accountant content with uncovering financial discrepancies, was now standing at the precipice of a discovery that could change humanity forever. The truth was coming. And some would kill to keep it hidden. Outside the safe house, something moved. Not human. Not quite machine. Something else entirely. The hunt was far from over. The breaking point. The abandoned particle research facility stood like a monument to forgotten scientific ambition. Concrete and steel, slowly being reclaimed by vegetation, it bore the scars of a project that had been abruptly and mysteriously terminated. Marcus and Arya moved through the derelict building with practiced stealth, each step calculated and precise. "The final piece of evidence is here," Arya whispered, her mercurial device casting a soft, iridescent glow across the decaying walls. The one thing the Guardians have been desperately trying to suppress. Marcus's transformation was complete. Gone was the meticulous accountant who once found comfort in spreadsheets and financial reports. In his place stood someone who understood that reality was far more fluid, far more complex than he'd ever imagined. The main research chamber was a cathedral of scientific potential. Massive containment units lined the walls, their surfaces etched with intricate circuitry that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Holographic remnants of data flickered in and out of existence, fragments of research that had been abandoned, or deliberately hidden. Nexus was never just about dimensional transfer, Arya explained, her fingers dancing across a complex interface. It was about understanding the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. A holographic projection erupted around them. Marcus watched, transfixed, as complex mathematical equations danced with biological diagrams. Representations of human consciousness intertwined with dimensional mapping, creating a visual symphony of scientific possibility. They discovered something, Marcus said, his voice a mixture of awe and growing understanding. Something that could change everything we know about human potential. Arya's expression was grave. Not just potential. Limitation. The projection shifted. Marcus saw representations of human consciousness, but not as he'd ever imagined. These were maps of potential, of capabilities that existed just beyond the current understanding of human perception. Pathways of consciousness that could traverse not just physical space, but dimensional boundaries. A low-frequency alarm began to pulse. The mercurial device on Arya's arm transformed, becoming a defensive shield that hummed with contained energy. "They're here," she said simply. The Guardians had found them. The first wave came like a ripple in reality. Shadows that were more than shadows. Figures that seemed to phase in and out of normal perception, moving with a precision that defied natural law. Marcus surprised himself by standing his ground. The man who had once feared disruption to his carefully ordered life now faced the unknown with a resolve he never knew he possessed. "We can't let them suppress this," he said, surprising even Arya with the certainty in his voice. The facility began to transform around them. Defensive protocols long dormant began to activate. Walls shifted. Technological defenses that had been waiting decades suddenly sprang to life. "The research," Arya shouted over the growing chaos, "is about to be revealed." The first Guardian broke through the defensive perimeter. Not human. Not quite machine. Something in between, a being that represented the pinnacle of technological and biological integration. Marcus Rodriguez, once a forensic accountant content with uncovering financial discrepancies, now stood at the epicenter of a discovery that could rewrite the fundamental understanding of human existence. The truth was no longer hiding. And the battle to reveal it was just beginning. Outside, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Emergence. The moment stretched between heartbeats, a breathless instant where reality itself seemed to pause. Marcus stood at the epicenter of a transformation that would redefine human understanding. The abandoned research facility had become a crucible of possibility, its decaying walls now alive with technological energy that defied conventional physics. Arya's mercurial device had transformed into something more, a conduit of pure information, bridging the gap between human perception and something far more complex. The Guardians, those mysterious enforcers of a reality meant to remain hidden, were no longer just pursuing them. They were witnessing the very moment of revelation. "The human mind," Arya said, her voice cutting through the charged atmosphere, "is not a limitation. It's a gateway." The holographic projections around them began to pulse with an almost organic rhythm. Mathematical equations danced with biological diagrams, showing pathways of consciousness that extended far beyond what any previous research had suggested. Marcus watched, transfixed, as representations of human potential unfolded like living maps of unexplored territories. One of the Guardians, a being that seemed to exist between technological and biological states, stepped forward. Its form was fluid, shifting between states of matter that shouldn't coexist. "You cannot reveal this," it spoke, the words seeming to emerge from multiple points simultaneously. Marcus surprised himself with his response. "Watch me." The facility began to respond to his words. Dormant systems that had waited decades suddenly activated. Data streams that had been carefully suppressed began to leak, first in trickles, then in torrents, into global networks. Nexus was never just a research project, Arya explained, her fingers dancing across interfaces that seemed to breathe with information. It was a key. A key to understanding that human consciousness is not bound by the limitations we've always assumed. The revelation was happening in real time. Financial records, scientific data, fragments of research that had been meticulously hidden, all began to surface. The conspiracy that had been maintained for decades was crumbling, piece by piece. The Guardians made their final attempt to stop the transmission. Reality itself seemed to warp around them, shadows moving in impossible directions, technological defenses activating with a precision that bordered on sentience. But it was too late. "We're not just revealing information," Marcus said, a newfound conviction burning in his voice. "We're changing the fundamental understanding of what it means to be human." Arya turned to him, something like pride flickering in her eyes. The man who had once found comfort in spreadsheets and financial reports had become something else entirely, a catalyst for a transformation that would reshape human understanding. The final transmission burst forth. Not just data. Not just information. But a comprehensive map of human potential that would challenge everything humanity thought it knew about consciousness, dimensional travel, and the very nature of reality. Outside the facility, networks around the world began to pulse with new information. Servers trembled. Databases reconfigured. The world was about to change. And Marcus Rodriguez, once a forensic accountant, now something far more, stood at the center of it all. The truth was no longer hidden. The emergence had begun.